Hello, my name is Rob, and I am an INFP. I've tested several times for it, and this is my first video like this. And I know I'm going to ramble and I'm going to talk quite a bit, but the reason why I'm doing this video is that there is a thing going around on YouTube, kind of a call for more INFP content. Which kind of surprises me because from what I understand, INFPs are probably the biggest consumer of this kind of content. But um, apparently so there's a list of questions about your experience as an INFP and kind of a um, hashtag INFP tag, and I guess you put that in the thing. And the reason why I'm doing this is, I've been listening to some of the other ones, and there was one that I heard where I just didn't really feel like I related much to what this person was saying when it came to their experience as an INFP. So I kind of felt the need to uh, maybe put my own voice out there. I think my experience is a little bit different, especially with everything that, I've read and studied about it, almost to the point where I'm almost like, am I sure? But I test again, and I test as an INFP. So again, as questions, I've got several pages. So let's start with number one. When did you discover you were an INFP, and how did it make you feel at the time? The way I discovered that I was an INFP, the way it started, anyways, was with this book. Um, Usually, when I gravitate back towards Myers-Briggs type indicator and the INFP and getting back into it and researching it, usually comes from a time of career instability, being unemployed if you want to be, or old school. Um, so around in the 2000s, I was unemployed for the first time in my life. I was in early, still relatively young, um, but I found this book in the library, and it was interesting. It doesn't really talk about Meyer-Briggs too much on the cover, just says do what you are. And so I started to look into it, and from there I went and I found at the library, or not the library, but it's bookstore, a test, did the test, actually had my wife at the time, my ex now, do the test as well. That's when I first learned I was an INFP, and she was actually an ESTJ. Interesting pairing, I know there. But it has a chapter about INFP, and then it has different job titles and different things that you could do. And a lot of these, as I was younger, were there. Be a writer, be a musician. Um, my degree is in television and film. Be a pastor. Not that I've been necessarily overly like organized religion, but even as a young man, I had a lot of people say, "You come off as a pastor. Are you? Are you?" Um, and stuff like that. So it was interesting to read. So that's when I first read about it. I liked when I first learned about it. It was nice because I think you go through a lot of your life feeling like you're a little bit crazy, a little bit off, and then to find that there is something that kind of fits you, and you'll be like, okay, maybe I'm not that crazy. Next question is, what part of being an INFP do you relate to the most? I would say the rich inner world. I am definitely a thinker. Um, uh, I don't like, I would have at one time probably qualified myself as an overthinker, but as I've grown, to me, overthinking is thinking about the same thing over and over again. For me, it's a little bit more like continuously thinking and always something new, some new idea, something, to correlate and see connections through. And actually, the point where I needed to start taking medication to help, the way I describe it is to give my thoughts less energy so that they're not overpowering and overtaking. Um, excuse me. So, definitely a rich inner world, a lot of time in my head, a lot of time, my own thoughts and stuff like that. What's INFP stereotype do you not relate to at all? I believe this is a stereotype, and I definitely see this a lot in like the Reddit INFP chat groups and stuff like that. There's a lot about social interaction, especially when it comes to romantic partners. Granted, I was a little bit of a late bloomer, but once I kind of came into my own, I never really found um, dating, meeting people like that difficult. I did marry my first wife relatively young, and that was kind of through like a like her brother was married to my sister. They were dating. That's how she and I met. Um, and then after the divorce, I did do some other dating. Didn't really seem to have a problem there. Even in like high school, like as soon as I started dating, I always seemed to kind of have somebody. So that kind of stereotype about being romantically awkward never really hit with me, but I was always very romantic. I joked that I came out of the womb falling in love. My high school quote in my yearbook was, "Would you mind if I fell hopelessly in love with you?" That kind of a thing. What values are you absolutely unwilling to compromise on? The biggest one, and I think it's actually gotten me in trouble a couple times in my career, is that I'm very for um, the frontline workers, the people whose back that the rest of our lives are built on. Also, like I will not take any shortcuts when it comes to um, delivering for those kind of people. I will fight corporate America. I will fight managers, regional managers, vice presidents, presidents, CEOs, tooth and nail for the benefit of the frontline worker. It drives me nuts when, you can't give somebody a dollar raise, but then, when they fly out to tell you that you can't give them a dollar raise, they go out to dinner and drink it up, and then they have a dinner bill that basically equates to what that person's yearly salary, without, that extra $1 that you give that person. So that's, an area where I don't compromise on. The being good to people who can't be good to you, I guess would be the way. How do you know when something feels off or misaligned to you? That's hard because a lot of times things feel off, and sometimes it's hard to articulate that for myself. But I definitely use the word off, and lately I've been using the term I want to feel normal. Um, and I know that it doesn't really make sense and it's hard to explain, but it's the only way I can really kind of explain it. And I mean normal by just like existing in the moment and not, having my mind a thousand different places, stuff like that. And so I think it's easy for just to not feel right in your skin or in your body or where you're at. And that's where, you know, just feeling off. What does authenticity mean to you in your everyday life? Authenticity, a little bit of background. My life has mostly been in manufacturing management and in quite a few areas, corporate America. And I really struggle with that because of my need for, um, you know, something being real. I don't think money. I don't think the strive for money. I don't think the competition of corporate America is authentic at all. And so every time I get into a position, I try to find a legit, actual way to say, this is what I'm actually working for. And usually it ends up being, frontline workers. Or like one time I was for a short period, I was with a military organization, and my goal there, or my mission there, was I'm doing this to help protect innocent people in America. Um, but authenticity for me is about about doing, um, what I believe is right and standing by that, and that kind of a thing. Are you driven more by meaning or by comfort, and has that changed over time? It's a combination of both. I would say I'm driven more by meaning when it just impacts me, when it's just something of my own. But I'm I'm responsible for other people. I'm responsible for my wife now, my kids from my first marriage. I'm still responsible for. I'm responsible for her kids, and not saying that they're all living here, but I mean, there's a difference between when you have the, for lack of a better word, luxury of just being responsible for yourself and your values and your morals and all that kind of stuff. You can stand on it because you alone take the punishment or the consequences of standing on those morals. But then when you have other people that depend on you, then sometimes you've got to, you've got to take that into consideration. That's part of the gray area, and I'm not a big fan of gray areas. Um, but, so I would say for me, when it's something just me and it doesn't impact anybody else, I am about meaning. But when it comes to being able to take care of my family and the people that depend on me, it's more about comfort and lack of a better word, security. Um, how do you recharge when you're emotionally drained? Oh, now that depends. There's different kind of emotional drain. There's emotional drain from just day in, day out. Usually with that, I just need to step back from everybody. Um, and you know, uh, Usually I'll try to like I'll end up usually watching a video, but usually it'll be like some educational or some, you know, about a place that I want to go visit or something like that. Now there's um, fatigue, which is a different version of emotionally drained. It's fatigue from work. Um, you know I've had burnout several times in my life, where it's and the first time I had burnout, I didn't realize that's what it was, and I definitely went down the wrong road with mental health that way. Um, but you know, fatigue in that realm takes longer. Like the first time that I had gotten fired from a position, it took me a long time to dig out and come back. Um, and I was unemployed for quite a while, and it did impact my family. We ended up losing a house. We ended up having to move in with relatives, and I'm not definitely not proud of that area, that time of my life, but it was something. Also, there's existential fatigue, and that's, a different kind of fatigue than from work. That's just, you're wondering what the purpose of it all is, and you're wondering why is there value? And that's a dangerous place to go to as well. And again, that also takes a long time to dig out of. And for me, that's usually when, like I said, I dig back into Myers-Briggs, I dig into the Enneagram to try to find some connection, some realization that I'm not crazy. I guess would be the best way to explain that. What kind of environments make you feel most like yourself? Um, I I would have to say kind of two environments. One environment where I don't feel like I have to be responsible for anything, where everything else is being taken care of, and I don't feel a guilt about everything else being taken care of, and that allows me to be more relaxed and be more like humorous. And I think that kind of ties back into the romance side of it, is that I do have a pretty good sense of humor and I'm good at making people laugh. I was actually a stand-up comedian for a very short period of my life. Um, and it's so that's one end. The other end would be like in a museum of some sort or botanical gardens or something like that, where it's definitely an opportunity to look at art and look at creativity and see creativity on another level and to see when it's kind of done well and done right. I feel good in that. um how do you express yourself? No, I don't express myself in like painting or song or sometimes I will writing, like if I know I want an audience to see it. um, Weirdly, lately I've been writing a lot of articles for LinkedIn where I'm kind of putting my little emotional digs in there at corporate America. Um, but really, the way I express myself is I'll go for a drive and I will just talk. And that's how I kind of sort through my ideas. And lately I've been doing kind of talk to text and stuff like that to just kind of um, convert my ideas. And that's kind of how I express myself. I don't necessarily feel the need to put it in artwork or writing or something like that. Um, so that's a little different. Do you struggle more with starting things or finishing them? I would say when I was younger, it was finishing them. Actually, my first wife used to call me 85% man because I would start things like home projects and stuff like that, but I wouldn't finish them. And usually, what would happen is I'd get to a point where something wasn't going right. Um, like, for an example, I moved a staircase in a house. And um, I did everything, got the stairs in there, even put down the padding. But when I started to try to lay the carpet, it wasn't going correctly, so I just stopped. So we basically lived with wood stairs with this padding stapled into it for a couple years before we actually had professional people come in and do the install. Now, I would say I probably struggle more with starting things um, because before I started, I kind of know what I want, and I start getting concerned about if it's going to match that quality. Um, like one example is I've actually um, been writing a book about being an INFP because there's a lot of good books out there, and this one I really like. Um, the comprehensive INFP survival guide. Even for as much digging I've done into INFP, this kind of covered some new stuff. And this is actually the first time I've heard about the FISI loop. Um, and that was really eye-opening for me. But even this is not written by an INFP. I can't remember exactly what her type is, but I think when you are not one personality type and you're trying to write about another personality type, it's like trying to write about like a different gender or a different race. You don't really understand it. But I've got this book that I've been working on, but it's starting to go astray from where my original vision was, and so I've just kind of stopped on it. How do you handle conflict, and what do you wish people understood about that? Um, I'm not great with conflict. I do hold a lot inside. Um, especially as a manager, that can be a problem. But like when it comes time to do like a review, I will hit topics that other people are like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you talked to him about that." But yeah, and then I don't go at it as, "Hey, this is something wrong." I go at it as, how is this going to be a solution? And I think that's one of the key things about um, talking to somebody in a conflicted way or conflict. Um, is to, instead of saying this is something wrong, saying, hey, what is the outcome you're looking for here? And are you getting the results you want? And then, what do we do to adjust that? Another kind of conflict would be like interpersonal, like, like say, you go to a restaurant and they don't make your meal correctly, or going up and having to order something. I try to remember that the other person honestly is trying to help me and that they want to help me. And so, like, even with calling like customer service or something like that, I try to remember that, hey, if I knew if I was on that other end, I'd want to help the person calling me, as long as that person isn't a jerk. Once you turn into a jerk, I'm done with you. But I think, a lot of us, we get in our head that everybody else is out to get us in a realm, in a way. So, if you stay focused and you believe that they're going to do something, I don't do that. And what do I wish people understood? Um, it's not that I don't. I think too many people rely on conflict. I think there's a certain portion of our population that they thrive on that. And I wouldn't necessarily talk like Karens and stuff like that, because even then, them you can have some compassion for. Like take the example that I talked about with going to the grocery or going in and ordering something. Let's say you go through drive-through and you placed your order, you said everything correctly, they repeated it back to you, you go through the drive-through and it's incorrect, and you go in and you're like, hey, you got my order wrong. Can we fix it? And, and there was a social contract there. You came in, you said what you wanted, you were correct, you paid what you wanted, and the expectation is you're going to get what you need. And if the person behind the counter is unwilling to do that, or, they've got kind of this attitude about it, and then all of a sudden it turns into, basically you have to fight to get your social contract fulfilled. um, you go into a little bit of a Karen mode, and then you get filmed, and everybody starts looking at, well, look at how unrationally this person reacted. When it's like, well, wait a minute, there is this whole social conflict ahead of that, or a contract that got blown out of the water. So I think, you know, but back to my original point is I think there's parts of the population that thrive on that conflict because they know not everybody cares about it. It's a way to kind of strong arm some other people. And I think, um, those are the people that need to get, you know, spanked for it in a way. What role does nostalgia play in your life? Plays a big part. I still have toys from when I was a child. If you look behind me, I've got toys. I still have a lot of my kids' old clothes. I have a lot of my kids' old toys, not with the intent to keep them. It's for when they have their own children, that they can take out their own toys and say, "Hey, look, I played with this." Um, so nostalgia does play a lot of that. You know, I do. There are times where I will hark back to, the past, and times where I thought things were good, and then, question, well, okay, what did I do to mess that up, and why am I where I'm at now? Do you feel misunderstood more often than not, and in what ways? I would say yes, I do, and I think, and for me, it's misunderstood in a way that I care about other people. I care about the people around me. I care about the people that I manage. I care about the people that I work with. I care about the people that I work for, because I care about them as people. And I think since I am not overly extroverted, and I've got things going on in my mind, um, and plans and stuff like that. And I'm not really great at explaining my plans all the time because I know they can change, and that's part of the P of the INFP. And when somebody comes to me with a problem, I'm listening to it, but I'm also trying to think of how can I solve that problem inside of the plan that I've already got. And so sometimes I think it comes across that I'm not like really in the moment listening to them. And so I think a lot of times people misread my intention because they're not reading it on my face. They're not reading it in the moment because, I'm here and I'm having this conversation, but my other part of my brain is also, back there thinking about all the plans and all the other stuff and how can I get this to work. And there's been times where, I have a plan for somebody and it's a good plan, it works for them, but they don't quite get why it works for them. And so I think sometimes that kind of can get misinterpreted and misunderstood. How do you balance wanting a deep connection with needing a lot of alone time? Um, Really, the only answer I think to that is communication. An example of that would be my current wife. We started off dating, and she would spend time over with me and where I lived. And there'd be times where I'm like, look, I need to be alone today. And at first, she definitely took it as in she didn't hear I want to be alone. She heard I don't want to be with you. And so it took a while for me to understand how she was receiving it and then to be able to explain, no, it's got nothing to do with being away from you. It's got to do about me being by myself. And I had to explain to her because when I'm by myself, I have no responsibility for somebody. Even when you're with me, and we may not be doing anything other than watching TV or something like that, I'm still thinking about, okay, what does she need? How is she going to interpret this? How, like, if say I get up and go get something for myself, now do I need to ask to get something for her? So there's always when you're around another person like that in an interacting way where you guys are connected. Um, there's a responsibility there. And I need my alone time not to have that responsibility and just be able to exist without having to navigate life with other people around me. Um, uh, what helps you feel grounded when your thoughts spiral? I wish I knew. I wish I could figure that one out. I guess if I had, it depends on the spiral. Um, Sometimes I would say music, like there's certain songs, but also there's also certain songs that can start that spiraling. Um, I I would say, if I was healthier, because there was a time where I did lose a lot of weight, and I was like, even though I was older than I was when I was a teenager, it's probably the best physical health I'd ever been in. At that time, physical activity helped me get grounded. Um, because it got me out of my head and into my body, if that makes sense. So that was a good way. Um, Next question: how do you relate to structure, routines, and discipline? Um, I prefer structure. Um, not huge structure, but like when I wake up, I take a shower. I can't get up, mosey around, and then take a shower. I get up, I take a shower, and even like right now, where I'm not working, I still get up, take a shower, have my breakfast, and then I go for a drive just to kind of keep that rhythm. And then I have a bunch of timers set in my phone to, okay, from this time to this time, I'm going to look for a job. From this time to this time, I'm going to reach out to people. From this time, because if I don't have that structure of that sort, I'm going to waste the day. Um, but when it comes to like structure at work, I need autonomy. I need freedom. I know I'm going to work on what needs to be worked on, and I know I'm going to, be able to make the priorities of what needs to be worked on. But if I'm going to sit here and have somebody hand me a thing and say, this is next, this is next, this is next, that's not going to work. I need to have flexibility and freedom there. And, a lot of places fear that because they think you're going to take advantage of it. But somebody like me, I'm going to put in a 12-hour day because there's 12 hours of stuff to do. So, I feel because of that, the autonomy is the reward. And I do need it. And I'm finding as, I go through the, Myers-Briggs, the INFP personality and the Enneagram personality, that is a core thing. What kind of life are you secretly or not so secretly trying to build? Um, that's a hard one. Um, because I have to work, and we all have to work. Unfortunately, most of us, anyways. Um, because you have bills to pay, because it costs money just to exist, and I can't tell you how much that drives me nuts, but it's the way of the world. And like I said, I usually run back toward Myers-Briggs when it comes to career crisis in my life. Family crisis, parenting crisis, stuff like that. Um, my personality plays into those, but it's not something where I'm running back trying to find um, some sort of guide or guidelines. Um, the the life that I'm trying to build is I want a life of really where less responsibility. Um, like like I said, most of my career has been in management of people, usually frontline workers. And as much as you may hate like if you're a frontline worker, as much as you may hate your boss, it is not an easy job. It is probably one of the hardest jobs in a company because in a lot of ways you're the person between corporate and the front line, and you're there because corporate doesn't want to deal with the front line. So you're in between, but then you've got to try to, hold these people accountable to decisions and metrics and KPIs planned by somebody who's not doing the actual work and is probably 800 miles away. And it's a hard job. And the saying is the juice is not worth the squeeze because you're not really making that much more. But you've got all this more. The level of responsibility for your compensation is just out of whack. And So I really want to get away from that kind of responsibility. I also, I want my family to be taken care of. I want that security. So I'm trying to get to that point where, financially we're secure and I don't have to, worry about what's going to happen and what's going on. And so I'm trying to like build to that. And it's not easy, like if I had to like sit here and kind of write out my life, I would probably say that I would like to have written a a book of some sort. I mean, I wouldn't mind fiction because there's so much growth potential there, but it probably would be some sort of self-help or evaluation book or reference type book. Um, but have it be something like that that really sells really well to where I can have enough money that I can just live off, um, dividends and stuff like that from it. And, have that part of my life responsibilities be done to where, my financial responsibilities to my wife, my kids, everybody, that's done. And then be in a kind of a thing where, people will come to you and want and not want, I mean, they'll want things, but it'll be like, hey, I've got a podcast and I'd like to have you come be on my podcast. And so do things like that and have engagements like that and interactions with things like that. And then, be able to, if I want to go for a long weekend motorcycle drive, I can go do that and go camp out somewhere or go to a hotel. Or if I just want to get up and go walk through antique stores all day long. That's the kind of life I want. I don't necessarily anymore feel like, my life has to have this big meaning and purpose, which I did when I was younger. I felt like it was like I needed to be like something that had some real like purpose to the world. And now it's more about having purpose for what I feel is meaningful versus what I want the world to think is meaningful. Um, how is being an INFP shaped your mental health journey? That's funny. Because mental health is so tied to the INFP personality type. I have been in and out of therapy most of my life. The only time that I really did not engage in therapy was when my children were young. Um, like my son is a couple years older than my daughters, and they're twins. And during that period when they were young, I was so fulfilled that I didn't need therapy. Um, that, in a lot of ways, I'm a big kid myself, and that gave me the opportunity to be a kid. And, the love that you can get from a child is unbelievable. It's, you don't have children to be loved, you have children to love them. But when they're young and, you're playing games and being crazy with them, and I think in a lot of ways, my INFP personality helped that out. Whereas like my ex-wife ESTJ kind of caused some issues with her ability to really connect with my kids like I did when they were young. But then as they started to get to the ages where, their focus goes from being themselves and their immediate family to friends, that's when I started to feel loss and got back into therapy, got into marriage counseling. Eventually, it led to my divorce. Um, and, so I've been in and out of therapy for a long time, and sometimes I really wonder if it matters, if it really makes a difference. I don't feel like I've ever met a therapist that really saw some stuff. And as I get older and I do my own studying and I come across something in either the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or something else, and I can go back to therapy sessions where I'm like, hey, I said something just like this way back then. Why didn't somebody pick up on it and say, hey, look, let's look at this? So some of the things that for me in particular, obviously burnout, but um, one of the things I would suggest an INFP to look into is childhood emotional neglect. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that your parents were bad but that they may not have given you the emotional support that you as an INFP needed. Now, say you had a sibling who was an ESTJ or something like that, got same amount, they may be fine, but they could have been good parents, they just might not have been the right parents for you. I would suggest looking into uh, childhood emotional neglect. Also, for me, I have avoidant attachment. I learned that as well. Um, I was the youngest child by quite a bit. My parents were older when I was born. I think they were kind of done having kids. And so there was a lot, I was left to kind of take care of myself in a lot of ways. And I think, not to clarify that, I had older sisters and I'm the only boy. And I think there was kind of this thought that, well, his sisters will help parent him. But I ended up being very self-sufficient at a young age. And one of the things I think that makes me a little bit different than most INFPs is that my extroverted thinking is a little bit more developed. I think like right now in my later years, I'm actually learning to more connect with my introverted feeling side than my extroverted thinking because, management, planning, all this kind of stuff. Um, you know, I had to develop my extroverted thinking at a young age. So at behest of my introverted feeling. And so through the process of my divorce, another job loss, um, strained relationships with my kids, really just took me emotionally in a wrong place. And so I am really kind of learn to understand my emotions. And I guess this would be something else I talk about with emotions. There's a lot of talk about there about cognitive behavior therapy. And the more I learn about that, the more I'm like, wait a minute, that's about correcting your thoughts to affect your emotions. And I think for an INFP, I think DBT, which I think is dialectical behavior therapy. Don't quote, but it's DBT. That to me seems a little bit more about, okay, what are your emotions saying? And then from what you're getting from your emotions, how do we develop your thoughts? And I think that may be a little bit more conducive for an INFP. Um, so mental health, I'm still struggling with it sometimes. One of the things that I hate is that it is tied to us. And, like I said, I've had burnout a couple times. The first time I had burnout, I didn't realize. I thought I was having, for lack of a better word, a mental breakdown. And I actually spent some time in an outpatient psychiatric hospital because of it. And one of the things I hate is when you get mental stigma attached to you, it's hard to shake off. You don't have a bad day anymore. It's like, oh my God, is he going back into depression? Or, oh my God, is he, that kind of thing. And even, because I had to take time off from work to go to this outpatient thing, and even though HR promised they weren't going to tell anybody, I got out. It was a stigma when I got back to work. And it was unfortunate. And I think, it's just unfortunate that we have that. Um, and I think a lot of it stems from the world is not made for an INFP. It's made for extroverts, it's made for thinkers, and it's made for, you know, judge for the J, for the people who get stuff done. The only skill that we necessarily have that really kind of sets us apart is the intuitive, but that's hard to always see in the real world and understand that. So I think because we've got a lot stacked against us for what the real world wants, um, it can create a lot of mental health issues trying to figure out where we're at. Are you drawn to spirituality, symbolism, and deeper meaning? I would say yes. Um, I I would say I believe in God, but I don't necessarily believe in organized religion. Um, it's hard, but I do believe in deeper meanings about things. I do, um, you know, see a butterfly, I think it's my grandmother kind of a thing. What is something small that brings you a surprising amount of joy? Actually, I'm going to show you. This, uh, the Saber of Omen. Um, every time I play with this, I am just a big kid. I think this is so. awesome and amazing. And this was like kind of like the first, like once I actually started to have some money again after my divorce, was kind of the first big financial thing that I bought. And even and like when I really kind of realized it was I went through a period where I was trying to get into minimalism because I didn't have a whole lot because I was divorced. Um, and it talked about things that bring you joy. And this is it. And as you see behind me, I've got a couple other more sabers. Those don't bring me as much joy as this, honestly. And I like it because it's different. It's cool. Looks awesome. If you don't know, Thundercats, the cartoon in the 80s, back to the nostalgia thing. Um, and when I saw that the company had this on their website, I had to get it. It was the most expensive one they had, and for me, it's worth every frickin' penny. I absolutely love this thing. I have it hanging on my wall. I just brought it down for the video. But yeah, every time I pick this up, I feel good. And I love this. This is the sort of thing that I'm into. Another thing that I would say brings me a lot of joy right now is, because I'm so burnt out on corporate America, I volunteered at a local animal shelter. And, I'm trying to like set limits and not overdo it, and I do one volunteer a week. And I tell you, I leave after helping out these dogs and I'm sweaty and it's late at night and I'm tired and but I am so freaking happy after I leave the animal shelter. I come home and I can't get to sleep. I gotta like burn it, that happiness and that joy and that filling me up out for a couple hours before I can even think about trying to go to bed. Um, and an interesting story was last week I took some. They needed a volunteer to help take some cats in the morning to a spay and neuter veterinarian place, and I got up and I went and I started I started my volunteer shift at the same time I normally start work when I'm working. It's always usually 5:30 in the morning. And that one time at 5:30 in the morning was so much better than all the other 5:30s in the mornings I've done in my life because, it was just I was helping out and I was taking care of these little kids or these little kittens, and it was just such a great experience. And it was really wild too because it wasn't like, I was expecting to roll up into an actual vet where you normally take your dogs, but this is actually, it was back in an industrial complex. Several different uh, shelters and stuff were there with their animals, very organized, very straightforward. Came out, got my information, and then, I didn't even have to get out of my vehicle to give them the animals. They took them themselves. And the whole thing was just such an experience and something being done right and being done for the right reasons to help these kittens and young cats to spay and neuter them so that we don't have as many strays out there. And that just really brings me so much joy. And honestly, if I could afford to take a job doing that, I wouldn't have mental health issues anymore because of what that does. Um, what advice would you give to younger or struggling INFPs? I think struggling an INFP are you know, synonyms, I think is the word. Don't quote me on that. It's been a long time since I've had English. But they basically go together or they mean each other. What I would say for a young INFP, um, I think that, we have different aspects of our life. And I think about this when I think about my children. My son is a thinker. He's an engineer and, he's kind of got his whole career life mapped out. He actually is in so much better of a situation in his 20s than I am now and I am at my age. But for him, I think the make it or break it for his life is going to be who he marries. I think for INFPs, the make it or break it for us is our career. And I know that that sounds like it sucks. Um, but I think for us, and like I said, the world isn't built for us. It's built for the extroverts, the thinkers, and in some ways the sensors. And you know, the judgment people, the people who, get stuff done. Um, and it's not meant for us. And so it's hard for us to find a way in this in a world that requires money, and that's a career. And so for me, I think being able for an INFP to find a career, especially when having meaning in our career is so vital to us. Like my current wife, she's an ISFJ, and to her, work is work. There is no, you've got nothing to do with your career. It's a place you go to make money. But INFPs, um, we care about that stuff. And, you know, yes, we would all love to be artists and writers and all that kind of stuff. But to be honest, to be on at a realm where you can really make money and have the freedom and everything like that, um, that's rare. And you need to understand that. You need to understand that, yeah, you can go be an artist and you can do murals and everything like that, but you have to paint what people want. You have to paint what, people are willing to pay for because you need money. And so like if I'm in an INFP, chat room or something and there's somebody in there asking about careers, the one thing that I would always recommend is I would recommend get yourself to the point where you can provide therapy. Usually it's a 5 year or it's a master's degree of some sort. And for being able to like practice therapy on your own, it's about 2 to 3 thousand hours of guided or observed therapy after that, and then you can be a licensed therapist on your own. And even with AI and all the other stuff, people are always going to need therapy, and as we move forward, it's going to be more. And it gives you an option to interact with people, think about things, care for people. You can and then set your own hours. You can start your own thing. You can do that almost anywhere now with video conferencing and everything like that. So I think for INFPs, young INFPs specifically, um, your career is probably going to be the biggest factor. Um, the people around you and stuff like that is another thing. Um, for INFPs that are struggling, that's a different avenue. Um, so I'm thinking like somebody my age that may be struggling as an INFP, because we talked about mental health connects with it. I don't know if I have great advice for that because I'm still trying to figure that out myself. Um, it's it's a hard road, and mental health is a hard road, and you know, um, because you can't really control the outside world. I would say, you need to find people that relate to you. Well, that's kind of hard to do sometimes. Um, and that's asking a lot of somebody else in a realm. And so it's hard because I mean, if you could really just be in complete control of everything and, control your thoughts and control your emotions and all that kind of stuff, it'd be easy. But, a lot of what I think an INFP needs is to feel whole and to feel healthy is external things. You need external physical things. You need external like, running, jogging, tennis, um, God forbid pickleball, but if that's your thing, do it. Um, but I mean, you need something physical. You need people around you that you connect with and that, understand you, and that's difficult. And then you need a career or you need a way of making money that fills and fits your needs. And again, a lot of that stuff is external. That's hard. Um, I would, if I had to sit with somebody one on one, I could probably work out some sort of a plan for them. But trying to say something broad, excuse me, is a bit difficult. Okay, only two questions left. I'm sure this is a long video, and I apologize if the audio sucks or something else. How do you think being an INFP shows up in your relationship? Um, Mostly when I need alone time. Um, being I need time to chew on things and think things over and run it through all of my own filters before I can really talk about it. Like I've never been good at on the spot kind of a thing. I've never been someone who could come up with a quick insult back, or even, really come up with, unless it's something that's true core, that, it's like an instinct, a reflex to no, that's not good. Yes, that is. But if it's something that kind of fits in that gray area where I don't have a defined yes or no guideline or uh, focal point in my deep being, I need time. I need to take it and think about it and think about all the parameters. And that can sometimes drive my now wife crazy, because she is a censor and she's a judger and real world and this stuff and like that. But she's also a feelings person, so she can get it, and she knows as long as I come around. But she understands that I do need some time. Um, I'm not always the best in the exact moment of expressing what I want or what I need. I'm also a type who feels guilty when I need something. So that's another struggle that we have. Um, but on the good side, I understand her. I try to make things better and I try to see things from her perspective. And I'm also several times I've had people in my life tell me they wish that they could see the good in people as well as I do. Um, because it's funny, it's like my wife's this tiny little woman, but you get her behind the wheel of a car and she's like she's driving a tank and she's angry at everybody and everybody's this and that. And I'm like, well, she's like, that guy is just trying to get in front of us. And I said, maybe this person's not from around here. Maybe, how many times have you been out somewhere and you know, don't know where you're at? And oh my God, you've got to get over two lanes and you're hoping for everybody's forgiveness. And I try to give that grace and forgiveness to other people, even when people do things that hurt me. And I try to find a viable reason for it because I think I still struggle to believe that people can be inherently bad, inherently evil. I think everybody is inherently good and just trying to make it through and dealing with life's BS. And, but I'm also aware that nobody makes themselves the villain in their own story. Everybody makes themselves the hero or the misunderstood or the victim. Nobody's the villain. Um, but I do try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I do try to give everybody grace. I definitely give everybody else grace more than I give myself grace. I hold myself to a very high standard, and to the point where it's detrimental. And you know, but that's how it shows up in my relationship. What do you want? And this is the last one. What do you want people to understand about you beyond personality types? Um, the biggest thing is my intent is always good. Um, my my meaning and purpose and desires and want for other people is always going to be good. And in most parts of life that can come across, but I think at work it's difficult, especially when you know people have a certain view of themselves. But when you're in the working world, it's very, it's black and white. Somebody, like take for instance, somebody thinks they should be a leader. I should run this department. And you see them and you see their characteristics and go, no, you mentally you don't have the characteristics yet to be a leader. But seeing your characteristics that you have, I see this in you. Or, I think what you need to do to be a leader is you need to learn to be a servant first. And so I want to move you into a position where, you are. taking care of everybody else's needs, and they're directing you versus you're directing them. Because I think, that makes a better leader, somebody who's been a servant. So then they become a servant leader, as they say. And I hate corporate speak and jargon and stuff like that, but that's one I'll budge a little bit on. But, my intention for that person is to build them into being a leader, but they may not take it that way. They may take it as, he doesn't see anything in me. And as much as I try to explain to him and say it to him, sometimes it doesn't get across. And then, or, when I'm trying to hold people accountable at work, like with attendance and stuff like that, um, it may not necessarily be the best for that individual, but it's the best for the team as a whole because, somebody's always coming in late, they're penalizing the rest of their team. Well, I'm the one getting penalized. I'm not getting all my hours in. Well, yeah, but you're also penalizing your team because your team's filling up the void, and they're also developing a sense that you can get away with something that they can't, and so that fosters a sense of unfairness. So, there is. So that's what I want people to know about me more outside of personality types is that my intentions are always good. Um, my integrity tends to follow along in line with that. There are times when you can have a good intent and have bad integrity, um, but integrity is interpretable. Intent isn't. I mean, it is, but I mean, I know what my intent is, and I know what my intent is with my actions, which are my integrity. But other people may misread the integrity, probably because they misread your intent. So I guess you can kind of erase everything I just said. Um, but no, it's a integrity. I always want good for everybody, and I think a lot of times that gets misunderstood because as an introvert and somebody who's struggling between the world of being, you know, a thinker, but I've got all these feelings that I'm still trying to figure out, that I'm still trying to understand and be able to use them as a guide versus a hindrance. Um, so that's it. That is all the wonderful questions. Again, my original book that I came across, uh, Do What You Are. And then if you're looking for a book about the INFP in and of itself, out of all the books I've read, this is actually the best one. So it's called The Comprehensive INFP Survival Guide. Um, I have the book, I have the audio book. That's how much I enjoyed it. And I think it really does a lot. But like I said, again, it's not an INFP person writing an INFP book. And I think there's a lot of misconception there. Um, Now, hopefully this video turns out. I'm just going to post it. I'm not going to edit it. I'm not going to go back and review it. If the audio sucks, I'm sorry. If the audio is good and you get something, I don't think a lot of people are going to watch this. I don't expect a lot of people to watch this, but maybe one person watches it and maybe something hits with them. And like I said, the reason why I wanted to do this because I felt like I didn't really connect with some of the other ones that I felt. And I know, I guess we're talking about Enneagram. I'll let you know about that. When I first took it, I did a quick little online survey and I came up with the stereotypical Enneagram for the INFP, the four wing five. And I was happy with that. I'm like, hey, look, four wing five is great. And, and I went through and I got books and I highlighted stuff that made sense. But then I took it again. I took a more elaborate one and more detailed. And through that, it determined that I was a one wing nine. And like I've seen some people say that a nine wing one could also be an INFP. Um, so not too far off. But the more I fought against saying that I was a one wing nine, the more I connected, the more I saw the traits and I saw the examples. And and so it's an interesting combination. And so I think I definitely have a different perspective on being an INFP. And I also feel like I have a different connection on being a type one. Because I watch, again, a lot of people do videos, but they're not a type one. So they're talking about it from, again, like talking about a different race or talking about a different gender. They get it, but they don't. And I don't like a lot of what I see out there when it talks about reasoning and motivations behind the type 1 personality. So I've been debating about doing a video similar to this, like that, but there's not a structure of questions to go through. So I may ask myself some questions, but who knows? We'll just kind of see how it goes and how it feels. I don't plan on becoming a YouTube person. I don't plan on doing a whole lot of this. This is one of those times where it's like, it felt like I needed to get it out. And I think that's an INFP thing. I think, you want the authenticity in what you're doing and you want it to mean something. And, even like an example of where, like writing a eulogy or something like that. You don't want to just get up there. You want it to be like the best eulogy that ever happened because you want it to mean something. You want it to be legit. And I think in some ways that stops us as INFPs from creating a lot because we want it to be authentic. We want it to be inspired. We want it to, you know, like they say, if you want to write, write something every day. It doesn't have to be something good, but you're eventually going to write that masterpiece if you keep writing versus waiting for that inspiration to write that masterpiece. So that's it. Again, my name is Rob. I'm an INFP. Uh, have a good day and take care of yourself, take care of others, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.